The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Sorry about that.
Hello, everyone. My name is Courtney Pollock, and I'm the Marketing Coordinator for SWK Technologies. I'd like to welcome you to our webinar, Sage HRMS for Sage 100 Cloud, presented by SWK Technologies and Delphia Consulting. A little housekeeping before we get started. Everyone has been placed on mute to keep the background noise to a minimum. However, throughout the webinar, you can submit any questions you have. If you'd like to submit a question, look for the questions section in your GoToWebinar, and we'll answer all your questions at the end of the presentation. We are also recording this presentation, and it will be distributed tomorrow to all attendees, as well as those who registered but were not able to attend. And finally, we'd like you to take a moment towards the end of the presentation to answer our poll question. With that said, we appreciate you taking time out of your busy day to attend our webinar. We're here to help you get the most out of your software solutions and help you find an easier way to run your business by providing you with tools, support, software, and industry knowledge whenever you need it. We've invited Delphia Consulting here today because they are the industry experts in HRMS and payroll solutions. So whether you're here doing research for a new solution or you're just here to learn, we'd like to encourage you to ask any questions you have. And lastly, as a quick reminder, SWK is constantly sharing important updates and software tips and tricks on our social media channels. We encourage you to follow us on Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. With that said, I'll hand it over to you, Joe.
Thank you. Welcome. So my name is Joe Rotella, and I'm one of the co-hosts for today's webinar, and I'm joined by Brian Delphia. And our focus today, as you heard, is to talk about Sage HRMS for Sage 100 Cloud. Now, I specifically love this quote from Steve Wynn, the CEO of Wynn Resorts Limited. Human resources isn't a thing we do, it's the thing that runs our business. Employees are the foundation of every successful business, and this is why managing your human resources is so important. But typically, we find companies that are trying to manage all of their human capital, really, with a mishmash of spreadsheets, documents, folders, checklists. And the reality is there's software out there that can make this much easier, and it can span the entire life cycle from recruiting all the way through separation. A comprehensive HRMS can handle onboarding, interfaces with your payroll, self-service, performance management, analytics, pretty much you name it. And that's going to save you time, which we know saves money. If you're saving time, too, from administrivia-like tasks, it means you have more time to focus on those strategic efforts. So I want to talk with you about Sage HRMS. We're going to weave in some of the cool things that Sage HRMS does. We're going to start with a real nice COVID-19 return to work example. Then we'll cover recruiting and onboarding. We'll talk about benefits management and reporting, including open enrollment, compensation management, and then performance management. And we'll let you know about two different types, both traditional and progressive. So I would like to begin with a quick poll, and hopefully we have our polling working. It's been a little flaky with GoTo. I'm curious, what HR software do you use today? So let's see if our host, there we go. So are you using Office applications like Word and Excel? Or maybe your payroll software manages your HR data? Maybe you're already using Sage HRMS, or maybe you use HRMS from some other publisher other than Sage. So you can even check more than one of these if you're using kind of a mismatch. We're going to give it a couple seconds here for folks to click in their answers and then share the results. So we're going to go ahead and close out this poll in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So let's see what results we've got. So let's see, 100% of you are using applications like Excel and Word. Okay, we're going to rock your world. And then 100% of you also say your payroll software manages your HR data. My guess is that it's managing some of the demographics, but we'll talk about that as Brian shows us software today. And it doesn't seem like anybody is using Sage HRMS or even any other HRMS from another publisher. So now let's deep dive right into Sage HRMS because it works so well with Sage 100 Cloud. Sage HRMS is a best-of-breed platform. That means you really select the modules that best meet your needs. Sometimes those modules will come directly from Sage, and sometimes they'll come from partners, ISV solution providers, who build add-ons to the Sage HRMS platform. And that's why Brian and I are here today. We've designed and deployed more add-ons than any other company in the world. Many of our add-ons are endorsed. That's kind of like having Sage's version of the Good Housekeeping seal of approval. And sometimes you'll get modules that don't even live anywhere in the Sage ecosphere, but that's okay. You add them on and they all kind of work together. The modules end up covering all aspects of human capital management. So you can see there, you could go from recruiting to onboarding, time and attendance, payroll, learning and development, and so on. The key to making this best of breed platform work is your Sage business partner, SWK. So that's where you go when you need a hand, when you have questions. The nice thing about the best of breed platform is, like I said, you pick and choose what's right for you. So if you're not big on recruiting, maybe you don't hire much at all, well, then don't spend any money on that. But if time and attendance is really important to you, maybe it even impacts how you do billing, well, then that's a module you'd want to look at for sure. So let's go even deeper into Sage HRMS. It's a configurable platform. You can actually customize the menus and so on. But let's talk about why we even want Sage HRMS first. It's all about that single point of truth or single source of truth. This is really the concept where you're structuring your information architecture so that data is really owned or mastered, if you will, in one place. You can share it out with other applications. So maybe HRMS keeps track of that demographic information for payroll, but then it shares it over with payroll. When you maintain this single source of truth model, you really ensure everyone is making decisions based on the same data. And you can avoid duplicate data entry and errors you may find when you're trying to keep data in sync across multiple systems. If you add manager and employee self-service to that, again, you're saving time and money, and you're making it very easy for folks to get accurate data, timely, it's transparent, they don't have to pick up the phone and call someone. If they can change or update information in the system using self-service, that increases your information accuracy. This also eliminates duplicate data entry, right? You're not taking a piece of paper or a form that somebody filled out, then going over to HRMS and typing that in. The key to this, as I mentioned, is Sage HRMS. It's a configurable system, so you can customize the menu. You can even add custom fields, custom tables to Sage HRMS. So sometimes you just want a single field. Other times we talk about a multi-row table. Let's say, for example, in our example today, we're doing COVID-19 testing, and you have to get tested every 2 weeks. So you'd want a table that showed the date of the test and the results of the test. That would be very different than, say, one field that was yes or no, are you vaccinated? You can build user-defined forms and even the routing or workflow for those forms. It covers the entire employment lifecycle, and again, it's modular. So you pick only the modules that you need, and this way it can change and grow as your needs change and grow. Now, obviously, COVID's in the news, and the new OSHA regulations that are coming out are going to be in the news big time. I asked Brian about that, and he was able to build a COVID-19 return to work example in less than 60 minutes. Now, there's a whole little list here of what was involved in that, but rather than have me talk about it, Brian, welcome to the webinar, and how about you show us what you built in order to track COVID-19 return to work policies.
Very good. Well, the first thing I was able to do, and I've done this several times. Recently, I did it on a webcast that struggling to get my mouse here. It only took me about 19 minutes to do the whole thing from scratch. I'm not going to do that today. But the first thing I'm going to do is log into Sage HRMS. And while I do that, I'm also going to hop over into HR Actions, right? So let me just get back to Analytics. And one of my favorite things that we can do with HRMS, Sage HRMS, is it really is able to adapt to your needs and to changing needs. I mean, who thought about a COVID tracking mechanism 5 years ago? Nobody, right? So here I'm going to sort of start with the end in mind. I was able to add a whole new page to HRMS. I'm going to show you that in just a second. And the reporting vehicle here, we have Sage HRMS, HR Analytics, automatically recognize that new page, and it has my COVID vaccine status, and I can see that I've got my first dose, and it's Pfizer, my second dose, and this person's cleared to work, right? So let me show you what we did behind the scenes. So I'm not going to do this too much, but you know, any good system, you need to have consistent data. So Sage does this by giving you the ability to add your own code tables or pick lists, right? So I went over here and for this purposes, I said, hey, I'm going to have a COVID status pick list and a COVID vaccinations pick list, and I'm actually going to have a COVID testing pick list as well. So I just say, hey, I'm going to define these pick lists. Then I go into the setup and I come up here to system or employee, and now we're going to define our codes. So codes are really key to any HRMS because that way you have the ability to consistently report on data. You're not having to type it in one way this time and you forget and you type it in a different way, so now you can't select based on that common code. So here I just put in for my COVID status, they're cleared to work, return to work. They have to isolate. They're subject to termination, like those 593 people at United Airlines, and or there's weekly testing required, whatever the policy may be. So that's how we just quickly added to the system. And then I was able to go in and I was able to design a custom page. So even if the publishers, Sage of HRMS, didn't think about how you want to track everything, every business is slightly unique, you can actually extend the data footprint of HRMS by adding what they call custom detail screens. So here's one I added just for COVID tracking. First dose, second dose, booster date, what vaccine, and what is the status, right? So this is how I designed a form. And if I wanted to add a new field, I just come in here, I say add, and I define a new field. So I'll go ahead and cancel out of that. Right. So then if I just get into the system itself, I go to employees and employee, I could just go through each person and manually go over here to the custom details and pull up that custom details field that I just created for COVID vaccine status. So here, this person's had his 2 doses, got Pfizer, he's cleared to return to work. Go to the next person. We don't know their data yet, so at this point perhaps they have to default to isolate because they haven't reported in what their vaccine status is. I could go through and maintain this data this way with just the core HRMS. But one of the cool things about HRMS is Sage HRMS HR Actions. It makes it so that all of your forms in your organization can be completed through self-service. So if I go ahead and log in as a self-service employee, actually I'm going to do this in a different browser. I'm going to go ahead and go into Sage ESS. And I'm going to log in as just an employee. I think I'll use John Wayne as my employee. It's taking just a second to wake up here. There we go. All right, so John Wayne, saved his password. So this is Sage Employee Self-Service. This is an interface that managers and employees can interact with the entire system. But one of the things I can do here is I can hop into our HR Actions or our Forms area. And as an employee, I will be able to start an action that applies to me. So I'll come through here and I'm going to say I'm going to do the COVID return to work status. I'll submit that. So here's a form that I've created based on just to capture the data. So I could say, well, I got vaccinated back in March, and I got my second dose of that 3 weeks later. I got the Pfizer, right? And then now, if I hadn't gotten this and I just needed to report my weekly testing, I could actually add a record here and do my weekly testing every week. But I'm just going to go ahead and initiate that action. So this feeds the system, right? So now if I go back to HR Actions, here as an administrator, you can see where things are in the process, right? So if I were to come in and look for all of my COVID forms, here's the one we just did. It's got an approval. I'm going to approve on behalf of this person. So you have the ability to override the approval process. So I'll just say demo and approve all. Now, if I set the form up differently, it would have saved immediately to HRMS, but you are also in total control as to whether things save automatically or wait for you in a space we call pending, where you can come through, you can view the report in HR without, having to physically get that piece of paper. And then I can go ahead and save that to HRMS. So now if I go through and I were to come back up to this, run this report in analytics, and I go to my HR analytics, custom reports, here's my, whoops, that's the wrong report. That's my weekly testing. That's not what we just updated. I'm going to go ahead and run this one up above here for the COVID vaccine status. Right, and then if I were to search for the person, let's see, last name was Wayne. And there we go. I could see he got his first dose, Pfizer second dose. And so that's an example of how Sage HRMS can do a whole bunch of stuff that you'd expect an HR system to do, but it really can adapt to current realities and business conditions that you find in your business to be able to track any type of data you need to track about an employee, have built-in workflows, allowing managers or employees to fill out a form and then easily report on that data with online analytics and reporting tool that's accessible not just to the few HR payroll types, but literally to the entire organization, to all of the management ranks. They are able to run these reports for those individuals as well. So Joe, let's go back to you.
Pretty cool. So hopefully that was just to kind of whet your appetite, if you will, to show you how quickly you could customize Sage HRMS pretty much to track anything you needed. And I think the COVID data is a really good example of employee-based data that really makes sense to keep in Sage HRMS. But now what I'd like to do is kind of walk you through the entire employment experience. I'm going to start with onboarding and recruiting, and we're going to work all the way through to reporting. So when we talk about onboarding, here we're really talking about introducing a new hire into your organization. Now, typically when you're onboarding, you might hand somebody a paper-based new hire packet. So they're going to review policies and sign documents. They're going to maybe fill out extra information you need, confirm information you need, maybe do some of their payroll stuff like a W-4. All that's going to be on paper, and you're going to have to manually enter that in someplace. Today, you probably do that based on what you guys reported in the survey, either in a spreadsheet or in your payroll application. Sage HRMS gives you that one place to go ahead and put all that data, and it has something called a workflow. It's kind of like a to-do list that'll guide you through the process. You can use it to record a new hire, and that could be a brand new hire or someone who you're rehiring. Maybe they left and then they came back. You can even do it to change somebody's status. That gives you a checklist to help expedite and standardize the process. You can even schedule tasks to be done now or at a future date or even by another team member. So that's kind of HRMS out of the box. But remember, we said it was modular. So let's talk about what happens if you say, no, we do a lot of recruiting and onboarding. So I'm going to refer to that as leveling up. So if we're going to level up, when we talk about recruiting, you might want to add an applicant tracking system. So I have two examples for you that work beautifully with Sage HRMS. One is called iRecruit, that's cloud-based, and the other one is Cyber Recruiter. That can be cloud-based or on-premise. Remember, you don't have to go with someone who's really connected to the Sage ecosphere. You may have other systems that you'd rather use. That works great too. The nice thing about that applicant tracking system is it's really going to help you post that job maybe to multiple job boards, track the whole interview process, the whole 9 yards. If you add Sage HRMS HR Actions on top of that, well, HR Actions can talk to that applicant tracking system. That means the info, when you've picked somebody and say, yep, that's who I want to hire, that can flow directly over to a new hire form. And again, the form is nice because it's got a routing slip at the bottom. And when you're all done with the form, boom, they're going to be added to Sage HRMS. You don't have to type any of that in. The applicant tracking system can integrate with HR Actions using a REST API or even just a simple comma separated values, spreadsheet. Let's say you don't do so much hiring that you really don't need an applicant tracking system, but on your website, you'd like to go a step further than email HR with your resume or maybe a little web form that your IT department built. Well, you can take HR Actions and add a little module that gives you a basic online application. Just what it says. It lets you build an HR Actions form, so you have a paperless form right on your website. And of course, that flows right in to the new hire form, so you don't have to do any typing when you go to hire someone. Some best practices we know of for recruiting and onboarding. The ideal thing is that your new hire process, it integrates right into the getting someone into Sage HRMS, and that the data you collect, address information, W-4 information, direct deposit information, flows right into payroll. We also can do automatic notification with yet another module called Sage HRMS Alerts and Workflow. I like to call this Yoo-hoo because that's really what it's good at. It can see a change in data and then say, Yoo-hoo. It can send an email, it can send a text message, it can even generate reports. What's nice there is you could email IT and say, hey, we've hired a new person. Here's the systems they need to be able to access. Here's their phone. Here's their email. Security, they need a badge. Maybe you want to email someone outside the organization. Maybe it's a benefits administrator you need to know. You've hired someone. Again, you could do all that automatically with Sage HRMS Alerts and Workflow. Then the person's going to log into employee self-service. You don't have to create that login. They can do it themselves, just like you create your own account, say in an online shopping website. And then once they're in employee self-service, you can give them a paperless onboarding packet. And that onboarding packet is smart. It can give the right person the right forms at the right time. And here I mentioned giving them their onboarding forms like I-9, W-4, direct deposit. You could use the same kind of automatic assignment of forms to give someone an annual performance appraisal packet, things like that. And we didn't mention it, but our forms can even have videos embedded into it. So you can really take advantage of multimedia that's available over the web. It's what people kind of expect today. And because it's all electronic, it's real easy for you to monitor progress and see who's done what and who are you waiting on. So with that, I want to go ahead and see how else we're going to level up here, Brian. Can you give us a demo of what it's like to recruit somebody and then onboard them?
Absolutely. So let's hop over here to my, don't want to be on my dashboard. Let's get over to our applicant tracking. So this is an example of a very basic applicant tracking system. Picture your website here, and then this is sort of your job board section. But Joe's gone ahead and he has applied for a job, and no matter what applicant tracking system you're going to use, if you want to integrate it in with Sage HRMS, you're going to somehow flag that individual that, hey, well, I'm ready to hire this person. So that's what this little approve button right here is doing. It's saying, hey, we're ready to hire, oh goodness, this individual. Let's try that one more time. And I have no idea. Let's try that.
Of course, it has to happen during a demo.
Murphy's Law. I just did this a few, you know what, it might be because I backed up the database after being in that page. That might be what the problem is. There's might be a way. I don't see it. Let's just close this down and give it one more shot. Just get out of this completely. Go back in. And log in. Oops, that's not what I wanted. I wanted to go to job postings. Here you are. There we go. Yeah, it's because I backed up the database while being in that website and didn't get back in and out. Sorry about that. All right, so I flagged this person as being ready to hire. So now I'll close out of that and I'm going to get into HR Actions. And as a manager, maybe I could be the recruiter, I could be in HR, I could be the hiring manager. Really, anybody can do this that you want to empower to do it. They're going to come through, and I'm going to do this as In self-service, I'm going to do this as an administrator. So I'm going to be able to do things for other people that don't necessarily report to me. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to say, who's the manager? So the manager is going to be, let's make the manager Hugh Allen, right? And then I'm going to do a new hire form, and I'm going to pick a particular form. I'm going to use our basic online application new hire form. And when I do this, what I'm about to show you applies to no matter which applicant tracking system you might be interfacing to. We will bring down all the details, and all of your applicants will be in a pick list under applicant, right? So if you just ready to hire 5 people today, there's going to be 5 people listed. So I'll click on that applicant's name. It's going to think for a minute, and it's going to think again, and it retrieved all this information about this particular applicant, right? So typically, an applicant tracking system is not going to have everything there is to know about an individual. You may have to come through and augment the data with some additional information, like what their job start date's going to be. Well, they're going to start on, let's make them start today. And the pay effective date will start today. And how much are we going to pay them? Let's do $25 an hour, right? And you'll notice that it automatically computes an annual pay and a pay period amount based on the pay frequency. And I want to come up here and indicate that this person is going to be in the quality assurance department, and he's going to be in operations, and I think that's good. Well, he's a machine operator. We won't put him in quality assurance, we'll put him in manufacturing. Okay, so if all this is good, I'm going to go ahead and initiate this action. If I've missed anything, it's going to stop me and say, I have something I missed, a required field. And you can mark any field you wish is required. So it's done. It submitted this action. So administratively, you have the ability to see where paperwork is, even if it's being done remotely by other people in the organization, either employees or managers. So an action, once it's been initiated, it starts out as being what we call active, right? So I can, even though this piece of paper in a paper world hasn't even arrived at my desk yet, I can view and see what this action looks like, right? So I can see everything there was to see about it. And I can audit it, make changes to it. I can kill it if Joe decided he didn't want a job and he left. I can approve on behalf of one or more approvals. I can even push it backwards, pushing the workflow backwards and forwards. And then these little circles over here indicating that I have 2 approvers necessary. These can be as simple or as complex as your business rules dictate. In this case, I have it going to an HR manager and to Shirley Douglas, who's our CFO. I'm going to go ahead, just for expediency, and go ahead and click approve all. And I'll just put in demo. Now, whoever I'm approving on behalf of is going to get this little message in an email. So they won't get surprised if something got approved on their behalf. So now I've approved that, it's in pending. And this is how we recommend setting it up. But if you're a high volume shop, you need to have new hires happening over the weekends when there's nobody around, you can actually have new hire forms as soon as they're gone through either initiation or the final approval process, they'll actually save into the HRMS. So that action just saved into HRMS, right? So now if I log out of here, and let's go back in as an employee, that new person. So I'm going to go into Sage ESS. Now, Joe's never logged into Sage ESS before. He's a brand new user. So he'll be able to click on first time user register here, and he'll put in his name. And now this is ridiculously simple, right? You would never set it up this way. I do it for convenience to show the software. But if you think about all the types of fields, social security number, zip code, employee number. Think of online banking signing up. You can put a lot more questions so that they self-identify. Then they also, just for future reference, have to come in and put in one or more security questions if they need to remind themselves of their login credentials. And I'll go ahead and click save. And if it finds that match, which it did, it'll go and say, okay, well, give yourself a username and give yourself a password. And I'll save. So as a first-time user, I've just created a login by myself for self-service. Now, this is looking a little skinny. First day on the job. I don't have any PTO time off. I haven't made any benefit selections yet, or haven't been paid yet, so I don't have a pay history, right? But what I will have is a my required actions. So this is Sage HRMS Dynamic Forms Checklist. And this is going to give me a list of forms depending on where I was hired into. And Joe got hired into the state of Ohio, so he has the Ohio IT4 plus the federal W4. The first thing I like to do on an onboarding checklist, especially if the data had come in from an applicant tracking system, is give the employee to fix the data, right? So this is the data we brought in. And I could come through here and say, well, I made a mistake someplace, or, I'm in apartment 5. And I could say, oh, I'm married. Or, that's pretty good. You can also ask for additional information. If you didn't bring in this information with the application, then I could be asking for emergency contact information, education, skills, and whatnot. So I'll go ahead and just initiate that action. And then if I go back to my checklist, I'll see that that action is routing. Now, if to do the federal W4, then I would come through. I can click out to the form itself on the instructions, but it's all self-contained right here. I could come through here and say, well, I'm going to be married, filing jointly, and I really don't have any dependents, but I would like a little extra. I owed some money last year, so I want $10 extra withheld. So then we electronically sign the form. And if the employee forgets their name, it's at the top of the form. So I'm going to go ahead and just click Save Draft to continue. And it passed the muster for my electronic signature. And now you can see that the entire W4 has been filled in. Now, the cool thing about if you're using Sage 100 Payroll, all this data can flow through a visual integrator scheduled job. It can flow right on over into Payroll, as well as all of the data in general between HRMS and Payroll flowing between Sage HRMS and Sage 100 Payroll. Okay, so go back to my actions requiring my input. So I can continue. I can do a state W4. I could do an I-9. I'll look at that real quick. The I-9 is nice. It can be started in one of two ways. The person who's completing section 1 can start it, or the person who's going to do the examination of the documents can sort of do section 1 as in the role of prepare translator and do it in one sitting. So here I'll go ahead, just sign this, sign off.
Brian, we lost your sound.
So I click Save Draft to continue, and now I should be able to jump to the form and I can see that this is filled in. And most importantly is those pesky little NAs, which if you've ever been through an audit, can really ring up some fines. So we do a very good job of completely and properly filling out the I-9 form. So if I were to initiate this form, it would then route to the person who's going to do the document examination, and then they would do that and fill out that section 2 of the form, and similarly they'd sign off electronically, and it would update update the I-9 form. So that gives us a real fast glimpse at the onboarding process. The one final thing I want to show you here, and I'm going to hop back. Well, I can do it right here. If I just go into HR Actions, oh, I can't do it as Joe Rotella though. I have to do it as a manager or as an admin. So let me hop into HR Actions, back as the Veronica Bell. Oh, where's Veronica? There we go. So because all of this is happening electronically, nothing's paper-based, then administrators or a manager can go in and they can see where things are in the process. So if I pull up our new hire, go, and I search, I can see the checklist that he has been assigned and where is it in the process. The little red explanation says this hasn't even started yet, but I can see I've got 1, 2, 3 actions that are routing, but I've got quite a few actions that are yet to be done. So this is really nice, especially on the I-9. You want to get that done within 72 hours of the hire. So this visibility gives the hiring manager as well as HR the ability to see where things are in the process. All right, so Joe, back to you.
Cool, thank you. So we still have a ton to cover. We'll have to zip it up. We'll move faster, I promise. Now that you've got somebody hired, of course, now we need to deal with compensation, right? And all of your benefits management. So out of the box, Core HRMS tracks your benefits, things like premium costs and employee contributions, your coverage amounts, your beneficiaries, your dependent coverage, even COBRA. It also has features to support ACA compliance, so you can proactively monitor compliance with My Workforce Analyzer. It'll even generate your 1094C and 1095C forms. And of course, we integrate with Payroll, which means we'll pass over to Payroll your employee deductions and their contributions. It even handles taxable excess life because that has to be handled as imputed income. When it comes over to reporting, well, out of the box, we have the standard reports that are within Sage HRMS, and that includes a total compensation letter. But you can level up, right? If you have Sage Employee Self-Service, ESS, an employee can go look and see their current enrollments. You can put up links to their plan documents and carriers. Of course, you can add a more robust compensation letter. So we have several of those, including some that we built here at Delphia Consulting. You have benefit reports with analysis and dashboards within a module called Sage HRMS HR Analytics. And then we also handle arrears. So benefit arrears reporting with HR Analytics, it outputs additional catch-up deduction file. It's basically a CSV based on the rules. And then Sage HRMS Time and Labor can import that catch-up deduction file into the time cards. As far as signing up for benefits, well, of course, out of the box, you're going to do it with paper. It's going to be manual data entry, but you can level up again. If you have Sage Employee Self-Service, you could add benefits enrollment. That handles open enrollment and life events, and it updates Sage HRMS. Of course, then you have to get those selections from HRMS over to your carrier. So there we're going to use Sage HRMS Benefits Messenger. Let's say you're doing benefits today using a third-party portal or website. Well, you know, you have to get started by uploading all your demographics. And then once people make selections, sure, the portal hands it over to the carrier, but you then need to come back and update HRMS so that you can update payroll. So we have a third-party tool built by Delphia that handles that. It handles communication with the carrier, and it's bi-directional. It'll upload those demographics. It'll download all of their selections. So Brian, what can you show us quickly about managing benefits inside of Sage HRMS?
Absolutely. So I'm going to go ahead and log off here and go into Employee Self-Service. And we'll go in as Veronica Bell. So 'tis the season for open enrollment for most employers. If you have the benefits enrollment module, then your employees will be able to do this, which is not happening. So let's do life events, same thing. For whatever reason, my open enrollment period has expired, but I can show you the life event, say for the new hire event, it's almost identical to the open enrollment experience. So when you go in, you have navigation buttons up top, and you can come through and say, what is your event date? So I'll say I just got hired 1/1. Well, I can't do that, but nonetheless, I can't change that date, but that would default. If I were doing this for Joe, as Joe's record, this would make more sense, but let's continue on. So I'm gonna go ahead and just click the arrow, and it's gonna say, okay, what do you wanna do? Do I have dependents and beneficiaries I wanna add before jumping into this? And then I could continue on, and it's going to give me all of the, all right, I apologize for not having this set up properly. Let me flip over and log in as Joe. So Joe will have a life event. He just got hired on the event date. That's sort of in the future, but that's okay. We won't do beneficiaries. And I apologize, neither one of these systems is set up. We had something wrong with our system, but it'll walk you through all of your enrollments, your medical plans, your dental plan, or multiple options, waive coverage if you require that. And when they're done, they can sign off electronically, and then all of your benefits will transfer into the HRMS system. Real quickly, one other option you have available to you is if you're not using benefits enrollment, but you're using, say, a benefits portal, right? Then there's a little tool that your benefit provider will give you a file. So they would give you a little CSV file after your enrollment experience is completed within the portal, and they would, you'd pick the file, we would import it, we would show you who's enrolled in what plans and what the monthly premium, what the deduction is supposed to be. You can validate that data. That's success, no issues found. And then you simply would load it to Sage HRMS. So apologize for not being able to demonstrate open enrollment experience, but it works quite nicely. And it also supports passive enrollment. So Joe, back to you.
So now, of course, the big thing is compensation. So when we talk about compensation, this is really planning and administering everything of financial value exchanged for work. So out of the box, Core HRMS lets you set up a next pay review date. You never want to forget, right, that it's time for someone to get a pay update, and a performance review date. You can even have pay grades associated with job codes, but you can level up. If you want to ensure timely pay increases, well, remember, Yoo-hoo, alerts and workflow can do email reminders. We also can give managers a checklist to say, hey, it's time for an annual compensation review. Here's what you need to do. You could even have a pay review due report that's coming from HR Analytics, even a pay change form to go through and make it easy for a manager to change someone's rate of pay, go through approval process, goes into HRMS, then it's going to update payroll. So Brian, how about a glimpse into what compensation management is like?
Absolutely. So I'll go ahead and I'm going to get back into HR Actions proper as an administrator, and we'll go back in as VBEL. So I'm going to start with reporting, right? So we have the ability to create checklists, right, that'll notify a manager that it's time to do a salary change. We can have a salary change checklist or a performance review checklist. But another way you can do it is if you just give managers access to a report, which is there's a compensation report under analytics and a nice little pay review due, right? So if you're doing salary administration at the same time every year for everyone, that's one thing, but if it happens on people's anniversary dates, it's a little bit more difficult to control. But if I were to go through here and look at a particular person and say, well, I've got a performance review due, but I have or pay reviews due, next pay review. Some of these are pretty old. So there's a link over here called Pay Status Change. I can just click on that and it will take me right into a workflow form where the user can come through and say, well, this is just a, just say promotion, and I can put in a percentage increase. It automatically takes care of things. And if I were to put in a larger percentage increase, you'll notice there was one approver at the routing slip at the bottom. But if I put in a 20% increase and I click Save Draft and Continue, it's going to say that I have a few more people. For whatever reason, that business rule didn't kick, but it would kick in more approvals. So salary administration is nice, and all of this information flows straight on over into Sage 100 Payroll. Joe?
So now we get into some fun stuff, especially performance management. Of course, out of the box, it can be paper-based, and you're going to have manual data entry, because Sage HRMS really just tracks 3 dates when it comes to performance management. But you can level up and go completely paperless with HR Actions. You can even go progressive with Maviva. So when we talk about performance management, there are 2 approaches, traditional and progressive. So Brian, I think your slide is stuck. So for a traditional approach, we really have 3 phases. This is typically where you do goal setting, then you set it and forget it, typically come back 6 months later, do a mid-year review, set it and forget it, come back and do a year-end review. It's traditionally very top-down, it's kind of linear, it's somewhat static because you establish those objectives early in this cycle, you present that to employees, and then you have those 2 somewhat ritualized, formalized meetings. Progressive performance management is all about continuous performance management. It's very agile, it's flexible and adaptable because your goals can be created, updated, changed, paused anytime. There's no notion of, beginning, middle, and end. It's a collaborative approach to goal setting. There's continual feedback and coaching and real-time conversations. So it's, think about a coach on a game. They don't wait till the end of the game to give people feedback. They're doing it constantly in the hopes of winning the game. So let's look at how we handle a performance review form with Sage HRMS HR Actions. When we have a traditional approach, you build the form in HR Actions. Remember, that's all about forms. It can be initiated by an employee if you want to do a self-review, or a manager if they're just going to do their own review without a self-review. There can be fixed questions, open questions, comment boxes, ratings. You can bounce back and forth. And when you're done, you start that routing slip at the bottom, the workflow. When you're all done, the routing's complete, we'll update Sage HRMS. The progressive approach, that's where we're going to set goals, track progress, keep comments all along as we're doing coaching. Then everything's the same as traditional, right? There's a form, it gets filled out whenever you want, though. It doesn't have to be 6 months and 1 year. You could do it every couple weeks if you want. When it's completed, again, workflow, then we update Sage HRMS. So let's break it up into 2 parts. Brian, first, I thought maybe you could give us a glimpse into that traditional approach. Then we'll come back, talk about progressive, and look at that.
Very good. So I'm logged in as Veronica Bell, and I'll go to my manager actions, and I'm going to just save, or not save, but I'm going to go into my drafts. This is where, this is your working folder where you haven't submitted a performance appraisal or a pay status change or a new hire form. And the first one we see here is a performance appraisal form for Joe Black. So let's edit or view that form. So performance appraisal forms, especially if you're using Word or documents in Word or Excel documents in your traditional process, are very flexible. Everything you see from this point down, literally every character is up to you, right? So this is a section. We have the ability to have multiple sections, and we'll accumulate the scoring for the manager and the employee. And here's our scoring. We have a 5-point scale here, where the lowest is 1 and the highest is 5, and that equates to our scoring up here. Here's a question. We have up to 80 questions, up to 20 sections. Sections can have weightings, as can questions. They can be either predetermined or be editable by the manager filling out the form. But this question is about customer service, and the manager has put a comment in. The employee chose not to put a comment in, but just said, I exceed my standards, and they agree on that front. So you can have a lot of questions. And then here's another section, has a different weight. These are for our past goals. This is an example of a open question where maybe it's the first time you're using this and you didn't have this to document your goals last year, but you did set them. So when you're starting your appraisal this year, you could come through and the manager can remind you what your goals are, and then you can appraise based on them. The final thing I want to point out that's nice about the performance appraisal process is you have the ability to be working with your manager, and you're the employee working on this at the same time. And the manager and the employee can send their copy back and forth to one another. So that's a real quick summary of the traditional performance appraisal process.
Now, we know from several studies that the traditional performance process sometimes is a struggle. In fact, Stephen Colbert has a book where he says that 90% of folks he surveyed said that a traditional review was bogus and fraudulent. And if you think about it, for managers, it can oftentimes be difficult to remember back, hey, 6 months ago, what happened? How did I feel about this 4 months ago, 3 months ago? You can even introduce a bunch of biases into the mix. So Brian covered that traditional approach. Remember, the progressive approach now is where we're going to set goals, we're going to be very agile, and most importantly, we're going to have a lot of coaching sessions where we can capture comments, and those comments will flow right into the performance appraisal form. Now, this is done with a module called Maviva. So Maviva is all about continuous performance management. We use it to set goals, to record those check-ins, and then to evaluate your progress. And it produces an artifact using HR Actions, which is that performance appraisal form. So next slide, please. Maviva really takes place throughout the whole year, whenever, on an ongoing basis. And you could produce that artifact whenever you'd like. You set near-term goals. You can align goals to other goals in the organization, align them to competencies and values, even post the job description. You have those regular check-ins. The whole goal here is to increase the probability that the end result meets the desired expectations, and then you can evaluate performance over a period of time with that artifact. So Brian, let's see what you have.
Okay, well, I'm not going to show you Maviva. That would take an hour or two in and of itself. But what I'm going to do is go in as an administrator and start an action for somebody else. And I'm going to do this for our VP of Sales, who is a user of that continuous performance management module. And I'm going to go into an existing employee form, and I'm going to find a performance appraisal that, let me get the right one, maybe there we go. So if I click on this, now it's going to ask me for some dates out of the gate. It's like, what period am I reviewing here? So let's do for 2020. So I'll put in 1/1/2020 to 12/31/2020, and it just thinks. Now what it's doing is it's going out to the continuous performance management system, and it's going to bring back all this information that it has. It's got their job description, and it has essential job duties. This one just brought in job description, so let's use a different form real quick. That'll be a quick Joe. So I'll have to put in those dates again because I've selected a different form. All right, now when it brings it back, it's going to bring back some different information. It's got the job duties again, but now it's got his individual goals and all these details about the goal itself, what the actual results were, what the target results were, all these check-in comments. So all that you can see that rather than having to type in this information and remember, more importantly, at the end of the year, what happened all year, with all this information can be brought in automatically from the continuous performance management system.
So if you'd like to learn more about how you can set and track goals with Maviva, you know, it works great with HRMS, but you don't even need HRMS. It'll work with whatever systems you have today. We have a webinar next week on October the 14th from 2 to 3 p.m. I'm going to pop up a quick poll here to see if you'd like us to register you for that. If you want us to register for you, we'll do the heavy lifting, get you signed up. You'll get an email from GoToWebinar with your unique link to join that session. So that's a great way for you to learn about continuous performance management as a whole and even see an application that makes that easier. Again, it'll work with any HRMS or even no HRMS at all. Or of course, it works really nicely with Sage HRMS. So I'm going to end this poll in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So let's just recap here. Sage HRMS really is a best-of-breed platform. You select the modules that best meet your needs. They might be within the Sage ecosphere, they might be outside of the Sage ecosphere. And as you can see, they really cover all aspects of human capital management. Now, I want to just give you some links. This is why we'll send you the handout from today's webinar, the copy of this slide deck. There's lots of ways for you to learn more. So for Sage Time and Attendance, we have a great webinar that explains how you can keep track of time using Sage Time and Attendance. It works with Sage HRMS, Sage 100, and Sage 300. So when you see these slides, you just click on that play button or that handouts button, and you'll get the video as well as the documentation. Next, we have a webinar dedicated to Sage HRMS Payroll. Now, you're likely using another payroll service in today's webinar, but if you're interested in Sage HRMS Payroll, there's a great webinar about that. We have a brand new web-based reporting and analytics tool called Sage HRMS HR Analytics. So I've got a link there as well for that recording and that handout, even a deep dive into one aspect of Sage HRMS HR Analytics. That's called analysis grids. So there's a recording there that really shows you how you can manipulate data and do, hey, show me this, show me that, and you graph it, put it up on a dashboard. And lastly, a couple of times I mentioned Yoo-hoo, that's Sage HRMS Alerts and Workflow. So we have a recording of that webinar here as well. And what's cool about Alerts and Workflow is you can aim it at any number of data sources, all based on your licensing. So even without Sage HRMS, you could aim this today at, say, Sage 100, no worries, or any of your in-house systems, and start to, automate the notification process, because you never want to be blindsided by data in Sage HRMS, in data anywhere, let alone in Sage HRMS. So with that, I don't see any questions, and we only have about a minute or two left. Did you see any questions come in, or are we thanking everybody for their time?
I think we're good.
I think we can go ahead and thank everyone for their time. Thank you so much, Joe and Brian, for such an informative presentation and for taking the time to be here today. And I'd like to thank everyone that attended, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day as well.
Thanks, everybody. Bye for now.
Bye for now.